So Shahbaz, do you remember the last time we had a really, really nasty argument?
Yeah, I think we're quite lucky that we don't have many of them. I mean,
no, we don't have many, but when we do, gosh, they're a bit ugly, aren't they?
Yeah, I think
we make up for the ones that we don't have, and then we put it all together, and it's like boom.
Yeah, like I think that's probably fair. I think we don't argue much, and I'm very lucky, and I feel very happy the fact that you and I get on so well that we don't actually argue that much, and we haven't had that many fights or arguments in the last 17 years. But when we do have the odd argument, they can get pretty ugly. I don't know. It's interesting. What are your thoughts when I just want to know kind of like, what do you think, or what's going through your head when during the argument and in the aftermath of the argument?
I think in the aftermath, I often feel like, gosh, we needed that. I feel like I didn't say what I wanted to say for so long, and I'm so glad I've had the opportunity to air my grievances. That being said, the reason why you and I go so long without having fights is because we hate conflict. We both are so conflict averse. So we will do anything to avoid having that uncomfortable conversation until it just gets too bad and it has to be said or it has to be done.
Yeah. I think what I've noticed in the last few years in our marriages, I think in the initial years when we were married and we were in our 20s and our early 30s, we were much more restrained in terms of keeping things to ourselves. So if something was bothering us, we just kind of not mention it at all. And what I started to notice, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is it did become a source of resentment, as in it started to basically build up, and then you basically just kind of explode. Or in my case, and I can say this quite confidently, I would then manifest that kind of build up through passive aggressive behavior towards you, and then you would kind of you would kind of catch on to that, and you would then become a little bit withdrawing, and you'd go a little bit into your shell. So it was almost as if what I was unhappy with you was then resulting in me manifesting or displaying passive aggressive behavior, and then that would knock on you and you'd become more withdraw. And what I really actually wanted was to just kind of have a conversation, just to kind of hash it out.
Yeah, and it's funny because I reflect on how far we've come, that now I turn around and say to you, Shahbaz, if you have a problem with this, I need you to say this, because I don't want to deal with passive aggressiveness later. I actually now just call you out on it. Like, just say what you want, say what you need.
No, I agree. And look, that's one thing I think which, obviously, I think one of the things which I've observed in our marriage is that it's a constantly an evolving relationship. Before we had our kids and we were in our, mid to late 20s, it was a very different relationship. It was just you and me. And then we obviously had our kids and the challenges that children bring when you're raising them together as a team. And then as our children are now getting older and they're becoming more independent, our marriage has now entered into a different phase where, we are starting to reclaim some of the independence we had before we had them. And alongside that, we're obviously growing older as well. We're now in our 40s, and, what may have been okay for us in our 20s and 30s may not be okay for us now, I think. And part of that is because we've talked about this. We've had almost like a psychological awakening in the last 2 years where I think we've started to realize, what things trigger us, why they trigger us, why we behave in a certain way. And that kind of has, at least for me, and actually for both of us, I think, has resulted in us now being far much more open in preemptively or speaking about issues that are bothering us early, rather than actually just letting them kind of fester and go on for so long. I mean, what do you think?
I agree with you. And I think the most interesting thing about us is that we've been doing something the same way for so many years. And now we've come to the stage where we're like, hang on a minute, why do I respond the way that I do? And why does he respond the way that he does? And how can we learn to respond a bit differently? And that's why I think these kind of conversations are so important.
Yeah.
I feel it's quite healthy for us.
Yeah.
To like unpack, why did you do that? Why did I do that? What can we do differently next time? So I think about some of our conflicts, and I often reflect on the fact that they're a bit typical now. I know you're going to do this, I'm going to do this. You're going to behave like this afterwards. I'm going to behave like this afterwards. They're so predictable now. So it's kind of like I can step out and view it and come to my own little conclusion. Oh, Shahbaz is going to do this and I'm going to do this. And it's a bit funny also.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I want to talk about that because, I mean, if our conflicts have become more predictable, do you feel that it's easier now to kind of manage them? And what I mean by that is if you know that something's going to kind of, if you know, obviously we've known each other for almost 2 decades now, but if you know that your husband or your partner is going to get upset over something like that, do you then kind of go, okay, well, I know that's going to upset him, so I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to make sure that this is done this way?
I mean, it's really interesting because this whole attachment style conversation comes from the unpredictability of it.
Yeah.
Like the reason why it happens is because 2 people in a romantic relationship don't know how the other person is going to act and what the other person needs. And that leads to a lot of unpredictability, which leads to a lot of uncertainty, which is where the problems come from. I think we're not having that anymore. Yeah. I know how you're going to respond and you know how I'm going to respond. And both of us are working on responding better. So it's removing some of the unpredictability out of the equation, which is healthy.
Okay, but then my question to you is, like, and how did we get there?
Yeah. In terms of, well, first of all, Shahbaz, how do we behave after we have a fight? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, when we have like a fight, normally it depends on the circumstances, right? So if it's a fight where I feel that my boundaries haven't been respected, or I feel as if I've been wronged, I usually will not have any desire to repair the relationship with you. I will almost feel like, well, I've done nothing wrong here. Why should I make the effort to apologize or do anything about it? However, when I know that I've done something wrong and it's upset you, my immediate reaction or my immediate desire is to repair the relationship, and not just kind of let it, not fester, but let it kind of just sit in flux for so long. I want to basically go in there immediately and apologize and make sure everything's okay with you and that you're happy and that our relationship is okay, and then I've repaired it. And that's really hard for me because I know that you react quite differently to how I react.
I mean, in some ways we're similar because I also believe that if I've done something wrong, I don't have a problem apologizing.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem saying, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I was wrong and I'm sorry. So I think that's where we're aligned. We both don't have a problem apologizing if we feel that we've done something wrong. But if I've been hurt, then yeah, my response is very different. My response is, I need some space. I don't want to talk to anyone right now. I need to go in my head. I need to internalize. I need to process what's just happened. And that takes me time. It can take me a few hours. It can take me a few days. Mm-hmm. And you've noticed I kind of shut down from you.
And what is that? How is that?
I think I'm avoidant. I'm an avoidant attachment.
So what is that? What is an avoidant? So
that's my attachment style. Okay. And I think yours is anxious.
Okay. But what is an avoidant attachment style?
So avoidant attachment style is someone who learned quite early on that their feelings are too big for somebody else to carry. For instance, I feel like I have so much going on right now in my head, in my mind, in my body, but I can't share that with somebody else. I don't feel they'll be able to carry it. So I keep it to myself. I don't share it. That's my response to conflict. So this is mine and this is mine alone to carry.
Okay.
And only I can deal with it. So only I will deal with it. That's what I am.
And so your response to that is you just shut down and you withdraw. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that's an avoidant attachment style.
Yeah.
And so if you were diagnosing me, what's my attachment style?
Shahbaz, you're so clearly anxious.
Okay.
You really are. Because the reason why I say this is because after a conflict and you apologize, you say sorry, and I say to you, eventually, it's okay, but you will still be asking me, are we okay? Is this okay? And I say to you quite honestly, Shahbaz, we're okay now, but you need reassurances quite a bit. And I even say to you, Shahbaz, how many times am I going to say, yeah, we're fine, I'm over it.
Yeah.
But you still come back for more reassurances. So I feel you're anxious.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah, I mean, if I reflect on my behavior when we do have an argument and when we do reconcile afterwards, there is a period, I'd say, of maybe a few hours or even a day, depending on how ugly or how bad the fight was, where I will feel a little bit not on edge, but just a little bit worried and just a little bit on my toes that things are not quite right. We're repairing things, but it's not fully repaired yet. I think it is interesting because I do, like when we have these kind of arguments, and let's say, for example, that I've done something wrong, I'm constantly worried that, and it's strange because we've been married for so long and we know each other so well. I feel like you're going to do something drastic, like you're going to walk out of the house and you're going to disappear. And I guess that's probably something which stems back from a childhood wound, maybe. I'm not entirely sure. But one thing I haven't observed about you is that, for example, like if we have an argument and sometimes I'll go off, it might happen in the morning or whatever, and I'll go off to work or I'll leave the house to do something. I'll message you within a short period of time, pretty short period of time, saying, I'm sorry, is everything okay? And you won't respond back. And that drives me insane. It really does. And I know you don't intend to do it, but for me, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud how, this anxious attachment style, it is like emotional torture. It's like, first of all, I'll be like, okay, has she read the message? So, because in WhatsApp, you have the two gray ticks, and then if the person's read the message, it's 2 blue ticks. So it's like the first hurdle of the torture is, okay, she hasn't checked her phone. Or, oh no, she's ignoring my message because the ticks haven't gone blue yet. So that's the first stage. And the second stage is then, oh, she's read them now because the tickets have gone blue. Why is she not responding? Come on, she can just send me a message back. And that kind of keeps you on edge. So, I mean, it's interesting you're saying that.
It's your nervous system's on fire at that moment.
Okay.
Because the threat hasn't been extinguished yet.
Right.
And that's how you're in that mode where you're like, I need to feel safe again. I need to feel safe again. From my perspective, Shahbaz, I don't play games. Yeah. I'm really not trying to torture you or hurt you or make you, if anything, if I knew that this was torturing you, I'd probably be a bit more responsive. So there's nothing intentional going on in my head. I'm not a manipulative person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can't respond to you because I'm not there yet. I'm not ready to open up and connect with you yet. I'm still in my head.
Yeah.
That's where I am. I don't know, Shahbaz, would you prefer if I was the kind of woman who sent you essays? Because I've never been one who sends WhatsApp essays.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, because look, that's me. Yeah. That's me. I am the kind of person that I think this comes down to my other psychological traits. I need to over-explain. I need to explain myself extensively and fully and set it out in paragraphs and basically explain everything really, really clearly. Because I think it's almost as if whilst I'm doing that, I'm also processing what's going on in my head.
Yeah.
So oftentimes when I'm drafting sounds like a legal term. When I'm writing a lengthy response to you on WhatsApp, part of it is down to the fact that it's almost as if I'm journaling. I'm also almost like kind of processing why I'm feeling that way. And actually it's interesting because when I do that, I have noticed it actually then makes me come to a realization as to why am I behaving a certain way. So it is actually quite useful. But I mean, in response to your question, yeah, I would love it if you send me lengthy essays because I'll be like, okay, now I'm getting a full understanding of what's going on in your head. And I think that's just part of my personality is that I want to fully understand what's going on in your head. And for me, it's quite frustrating and dare I say even like, torturous that sometimes parts of your thinking or your brain are withheld from me and it's almost a mystery. And I find that's quite difficult for me. And I have to sit in that discomfort basically and go, okay, right, she's not going to open up on this. I just have to kind of let it be and just kind of move on. So yeah.
But you know what's interesting? We both hate conflicts, but we just both have different ways of seeking safety afterwards.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we both want the same thing.
Yeah.
We both want to feel safe and secure again. We're just going about it in different ways. And we're speaking a different language sometimes as well.
I mean, one thing which I have learned over the years now, and I have become better at, is I know that you need your space just to kind of process and breathe when we've had a heated discussion or an argument. And so I know that if I'm going to send you a message, I'm going to try and call you, you're probably not going to respond. So whereas I would prefer you to just drop me a message saying, I need some space, I know now that you need some space. So you're not going to respond, so I just need to kind of leave it be for a while. But what I want to understand is, the kind of the genesis or the origins of the attachment styles. And I remember just before we were recording, you were telling me about, or just before we started recording, you were telling me about this study that they did. So what is that study that they basically did on figuring out attachment styles? So
it's a really famous study by Mary Ainsworth. And she set up a really interesting experiment where she had infants in a room with their caregivers and there were some toys. And she created an environment where the caregiver would leave and return again. And from there, she observed the responses of the infants. Some were quite upset when their caregiver left, but when they came back, they were easily consoled. They were okay again. Others were quite clingy when their caregiver returned. And even after they were consoled and soothed, they still wouldn't relax. It still remained clingy and upset. And then there was another group that would throw a tantrum. They'd be okay, but then they'd be upset again. So just observing these infants, Mary Ainsworth created attachment styles. And she said some are anxious, some are secure, some are anxious avoidant. And she then says that these early experiences then go on to shape how we behave in relationships later on in life. So she sees this as a lens, our early childhood experiences, as how we show up in other relationships. And I find it interesting because if I make the connection, as a child, I was a withdrawn child. Mm-hmm. I was the person who, after a conflict or a telling off or a fight with a sibling or a parent, I'd go to my room. I was quite dramatic. I'd cry a lot. I'd be lying, staring at the window, thinking with tears falling down my face. Yeah. I would journal a lot. I'd be writing in my diary, angry writing, big capitalized sentences. I am so mad right now, and why did this happen? But a lot of it was internal. I wasn't talking to anyone about it. Nobody was there. I was alone, but that was like my default state. And I would do that for a few hours until I would feel okay again, and then I'd come back and interact with the world again. So I feel like I learned from an early age that my emotions are mine, my problems are mine, my issues are mine, and I need to deal with it alone, by myself, in my own head. I think that's the message I got.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. So I suppose that kind of leads us into the topic of parenting, right? So what was interesting about what you said is that when you have situations like that, you will retreat, go into your room, you'll do your journaling or write things in your diary. But what I found interesting about what you said is that you would not, after the events had transpired, speak to a caregiver about it, and neither would one of your parents or caregivers come and speak to you about it to kind of address it. Do you think that kind of sowed the seeds of you then coming to a realization when you were a young adolescent that I'm not going to have an adult basically kind of give me that emotional security? I'm going to have to learn to develop my own mechanisms to cope with the emotional insecurity here. And this is what I'm going to do.
That's accurate.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
And so my question then is, and this is actually interesting for me to understand, in that situation, if a parent did come to you and talk to you about it and gave you the opportunity to open up and discuss openly and maybe try to repair what had gone wrong. So let's just take an example. Let's say, for example, your dad shouted at you, but then afterwards came and talked to you about it and then sat down with you and explained why he was upset and angry, maybe even apologized, gave you a chance to kind of speak about it and to kind of express your feelings. Do you think that attachment style would not be there? So like you wouldn't be with avoidant anymore in that situation, but you become a bit more secure?
I believe so.
Okay.
I mean, it's not black and white. There are nuances that I want to talk about later, but I genuinely do believe so. I believe that's the message I got as a child, and this is why I behave the way I do today.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Did you do the same? Did you also go to your room and be all dramatic and cry and listen to sad songs and journal?
Oh, wow. No, I think for me, it was very different. I never kept a diary or journaled. I used to go into my head quite a lot. I think for me, obviously, we've identified, and I know this as well from the therapy that I've done, that I do have an anxious attachment style. So I guess for me, one of the main fears was just that I wanted to make sure that my parents were happy with me and okay with me, and that everything was, and that I was getting the love basically, and that the love was not conditional on anything, if that makes sense. I think growing up in a household, it was also, I think, quite challenging for my mum sometimes to raise us. And that obviously comes down to the fact that, you know, the circumstances around her raising us were not always the easiest. And that I can only imagine for a caregiver, because obviously we're parents as well now, that was challenging. And so she wasn't able to give us her emotional availability or emotional capacity all the time, because it became overwhelming for her. And obviously my father was at work. He used to work quite a lot and he used to be away from the house for quite lengthy periods of time. So I think my concern or my worry growing up when I was a kid, and I see this because this reflects in our marriage as well, is was just being abandoned. I think just mum not giving us the emotional attention that we needed, but sometimes just not being there. And I think that also came from that dad was not there for a long period of time as well. And if I had to trace that back to its origins, I think it kind of stemmed from when we moved to Pakistan. And my dad then moved back to the UK to work because he couldn't find employment in Pakistan. And for almost the best part of 4 years, we barely saw him. So one of the caregivers was over there. So maybe that kind of came from there as well. I mean, I've not really unpacked it, but maybe the origins of the anxious attachment style. But I want to talk about the nuances that you were explaining. I'm curious to hear more about that. Can you explain that?
So the nuances are, there's quite a number of nuances, but before I go there, I just want to address the point that, you know, when we talk about attachment styles, we're not trying to say that it's bad to be anxious, it's bad to be avoidant, and we should not be anxious or avoidant. Then the point of this conversation is just to make aware that these were just behavioral adaptations. It's what we did as children that helped us feel safe at that time. Yeah. But the problem is that we are now carrying them into our adult relationships, and it's not serving us. We don't need to withdraw and retreat and go in our head, because I am in a relationship now where I can open up, I can speak. You will be receptive to hear what I have to say. I don't need to replay what I did when I was a child. And I think that's what's really interesting, is that it served me then, but it doesn't serve me now, yet I'm still doing the same thing again. And I think that awareness, it's what's key. I mean, do you also feel like you don't need to behave with me the way perhaps you might have responded as a child, because I'm not your childhood experience anymore?
Yeah, I think but it's not something which I felt immediately. I think it's something which over the years I've kind of come to learn. I think because when you enter into marriage, you're not entirely sure about how the other person is going to behave and interact with you, depending on your own reactions, right? And so initially, it's almost as if you're getting to know each other, right? So you're learning each other's behaviors and reactions. So I think initially I did feel almost as if that default anxious kind of mode within me was going to translate into my marriage with you. And I think over time and over the years, I've just through being with you and seeing how you do react to situations when you're with me, you know, that trust has built up. And I'm like, no, she's not going to behave in the same way that or I'm not going to experience the same kind of feelings that I felt when I was a child with her. And so I've kind of learned to trust that that's not going to happen in our relationship. And so it's kind of given me a bit more security. I mean, does that make sense?
It makes total sense, because one of the ways that you heal from your attachment style is that you need to be exposed to positive relationships.
Yeah.
You need to feel or see in action that the past is not going to repeat itself. I can feel, and it doesn't just have to be in romantic relationships. It can be in friendships. It can be in therapeutic relationships. It can be in a parent relationships. You will get the message over time that, hang on a minute, I am safe. I am okay. And then your body starts getting the message. But again, it has to happen repetitively for a significant period of time for you to override the previous wiring. It takes time. It really does.
Is it a bit like neuroplasticity, that when you're a kid, you develop habits? So, for example, you know, learning how to, you know, write, using your left hand and right hand, or learning how to play the piano. You learn these kind of things, or rather even learning how to ride a bike. You learn these habits when you're a kid. And if you've learned them and you've been repeating them again and again and again, it doesn't matter if you have a period of time where you don't do those things again, but you can, it's like riding a bike. If you learn how to ride a bike when you were 6, 7, 8, and you rode it for a few years, and then you stopped riding a bike, you could probably get back onto it very quickly in your 30s and 40s, for example. Is it a bit like that?
It's completely like that.
Okay, so it's
but
like...
I will also say still, Shahbaz, that the gap between insight and change is very wide.
Yeah.
Just because we know what we know, just because we read what we read, just because we're having this conversation, we've gone to therapy, that doesn't mean that tomorrow we're not going to have a conflict and repeat the same predictable behaviors where I'm going to shut down and you're going to lean in.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard. Change is very, very hard.
So what it sounds like essentially is that becomes your default state, right? So I guess it sounds a little bit disheartening, if I'm being honest with you, because it sounds like as if I've now been molded, right, as a kid, as a teenager, to behave in this kind of way. And so I'm always going to behave that way into my adulthood when I'm triggered by something or something happens, which makes my nervous system think that it's basically very similar to the events that happened when I was a kid or a teenager. And so I'm going to behave in the same kind of way. Like, is there a fix?
No, because you use the word default state. You know, default state is a switch that can also be switched off, right?
Okay.
We don't have to live in default. We can choose to behave differently. And that's the thing, Shahbaz, change lives in the body before it lives in the mind. So what I mean by that is that if you do something differently enough times, eventually the mind will get the message. So you know how we said earlier on in the conversation, you're going to do this, I'm going to do this, you're going to behave like... We can see it now. We can actually step back, almost take ourselves out of whatever's happening and be like, we're very predictable. You're going to go off and do this. Perhaps what would it look like if this time you didn't do that? What would it look like this time, Alveena, if you didn't retreat and you didn't say to Shahbaz, I'm fine, when you're not really fine? And if you just talked and expressed your needs rather than going off in your shell or in your head.
But, and look, you've raised really good points here, right? But I mean, just reflecting on behaviors that I've seen in our wider community and even growing up, like in just in society generally, like you will see people that are our age now, still behaving in ways that is almost childlike or adolescent-like when they're being triggered in a fight or if something is said. Like, clearly that behavior is still there. I mean, so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's an active process. You can't just unlearn this behavior because it's so hardwired or becomes so hardwired into your nervous system, right? So from what you're saying, it sounds like it actually requires you to do the work.
So people say, do the work, do the work.
What does that mean?
It really means there's work involved, and work is not easy. Work looks like having those introspective, reflective conversations with yourself, with a therapist, with a friend, asking people, you know what, call me out. If I'm not doing something wrong, tell me. You know how sometimes we say to the children, when they say to us, they pull us up about something, we don't have a problem saying to them, you're right. That wasn't okay. I should have been better. And if I do that again, call me out on it. Because sometimes we don't see our flaws and our faults, but it takes somebody else to point them out to us. But we have to take our ego out of the equation so that we can be receptive to that kind of feedback. So it's so many things, but that's essentially what doing the work looks like. I mean, I look at you, Shahbaz, you really are doing the work. You go to therapy regularly, you journal regularly. We have healthy, uncomfortable conversations often. This is all the work, but the problem is that most of us do not like to sit with discomfort. We don't like uncomfortable conversations. We don't like even thinking. So I think you know about that famous psychology experiment where a group of people were told to sit in a room and do nothing and be alone with their thoughts. And they had the option to press a button and give themselves a shock. So that's the only thing you could do. But the idea of sitting in the room with your own thoughts and being alone and being introspective or being even bored was so hard for them that the vast majority of them chose to press a button and give themselves a shock. How sad is that?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think, I mean, you raise a good point, because I think people are becoming, and look, I see this with friends and colleagues all the time, and it drives me insane. Like, for example, you're talking to them and they just literally get on the phone, or if they have like 2 minutes where they're sitting still, or even if they're in the lift, they're on their phone. I mean, there's this constant desire for a dopamine hit on Instagram or WhatsApp or Snapchat or whatever social media platform you want to basically, reference. People just, I mean, I know we're going off on a bit of a tangent here, but I've noticed that people just cannot sit still. People don't have the ability to just sit quietly with their own thoughts and just switch off from all the noise that's going on around them. And having a portable device in your hand just kind of exacerbates and kind of accentuates that behavior, where you have something available in your hand, a device which just 24/7 gives you that stimulus all the time, where you just can escape and not think about what's going on here. So it's interesting.
It is. It's dopamine. It's also distraction.
Yeah.
It's also boredom. And it's also the discomfort with sitting with your own thoughts.
It's escapism.
It is escapism.
Right? I mean, I look at it and I just think to myself, I do think about it, because I think that sometimes, from relationships that I've experienced over the past years with friends and colleagues, a lot of them are just constantly trying to find a way to escape their problems and uncomfortable situations in their lives, whether they're having issues with their children or with their marriages, or whether they're going through divorces, or whether they're having, their health or whatever. Rather than choosing to sit with the discomfort, they will try and find ways to kind of escape from it all. So, let's go for lunch, let's do this, let's go out.
Let's drink, let's smoke, let's,
Yeah,
even people who are addicted to shopping, it's all a form of getting out of their head.
Correct. It's a way of trying to soothe yourself, right? It's a soothing mechanism. And you're right, like, people, when they're going through difficult times, they'll develop vices, like they may take up alcohol, or they'll start smoking or vaping or whatever it is, or I know people that just do not want to go home. They just want to constantly be out and about and doing stuff like active, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but they'll go and play sport, and then after they're going to have dinner with a friend, and then they'll go out basically and have a drink or a coffee, and then come back at like midnight, so they don't have to face their spouse or their family or even any issues at home. So it is interesting. So I want to take this conversation back to discussing nuances. Obviously, we've established that there's the the avoidant attachment style, there's the anxious attachment style, and there's secure attachment as well. What are the nuances that you see?
So I love Mary Ainsworth, and I love her study, and I really see attachment styles everywhere, but it's not without its criticism. And I think one of the biggest criticism that attachment style has is that this study was done on a very Western sample with Western infants and caregivers. And we know now that that cannot necessarily translate to other cultures or other family setups. Like, for example, look at us. Our setup isn't the typical mother, father, children. We're not a typical nuclear family. Your father lives with us, and he plays a role in also raising our children as well. And I don't know what it was like for you, but for me, my grandmothers, both maternal and paternal, played a real key role in raising me. My mum used to go to work, and I was either with my maternal grandmother or my paternal grandmother, and they played such a significant role in shaping my upbringing. So it's like, if one caregiver wasn't there, that doesn't mean I was abandoned. If anything, I had lots of other multiple people looking after me. Yeah. And that's quite common in our background, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you were saying that, it just reminded me of the old saying that it takes a village to raise a child, right? And I think that's completely true. I mean, if you look back to decades or even centuries, maybe not necessarily in Western cultures, but particularly in cultures, in Asia, the Middle East, the Far East, I think about my grandparents and being around us and extended family being around you all the time. So you had so many people around you that essentially were there to provide you with practical advice and support, but also emotional support. It may have been the case that you necessarily didn't get the emotional support you needed from your mother or your father. You actually got it. You got a much better. You actually received far better emotional support from a grandparent, which I've heard of quite often. So makes a lot of sense to me.
I mean, look at us when I go to the UK, and often you're not there, and I'm usually benefiting from that experience and going out with my sisters and my friends. My children are with my parents. So my mom's feeding my children, and my dad is taking them to London and showing them the sights.
Correct.
And if they're not there, my brother's there taking them to go and read prayer. I'm not even, if Zakaria needs help with maths, my sister's there teaching him, even to the extent that my mum does Quran with them, which all of these things, if I'm unable to do or I'm not doing, there's multiple other people there to give it to them. So in a way, that kind of environment makes a child more secure because there's multiple caregivers attuned to that child's need. Because let's be realistic, how much can one do as well? Like, I can't be responsible for their Quran and to take them sightseeing in London and consoling them when they're upset. I can't do everything. But in London, I feel like their needs are met very well because we're around extended family.
Yeah, no, look, I think, and I know we're probably going off on a bit of a tangent here. The conversation obviously is around attachment styles, but it is an interesting point. And just to comment on that, I think the nuclear family system has very much put so much pressure and stress on parents to do everything for their kids. And as a result of that, it can result to parents getting burnt out and almost just checking out emotionally when it comes to raising their kids and giving them that secure attachment, because they think of themselves, I'm feeding you, I'm taking care of your other needs, like, your washing, your ironing, your clothing. I'm taking you out for shopping. I'm overlooking your homework and making sure that I'm dropping you off to school, your extracurricular activities. If you think about all of those things, what's left in the cup or in the tank for you to actually give to them to help them to develop secure emotional connection with you if you're constantly just doing that, right? And I can completely understand and even sympathize when parents start to get snappy with their kids and they start to basically get short with them or irritable, because it's like, I can see what's going on in the head of the parent. It's like, I'm doing so much for you. Like, I need some breathing space, just kind of back off. But I think having a community model really circumvents those issues. So I think it's really interesting to say that. And I think there is a lot of wisdom in that saying that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say is also, just from observing this with my own kids, it gives them such a rich and diverse exposure to fostering and building other relationships and actually being able to figure out how to interact with other people within their family. And the wider the extended family is, the richer that experience is. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, completely. Like, I just use the example of, again, when I'm in London and Zakaria needs to have a heart-to-heart, I can say to him, can you please go and talk to your grandmother about this? Yeah. Or my daughter wants to go sightseeing in London. I'm exhausted. I don't want to go and see Big Ben. I saw it multiple times growing up. I can say, go speak to my dad. And I think that takes the pressure off. And it means that the child's needs are being met. And again, going back to Ainsworth, she just observed that one sole caregiver returning and coming back. And it's like, well, no, because we don't come from setups. Our society doesn't come from a setup where there is just that one primary caregiver. We have many, and that all contributes to making a child more secure. How many times has Zakaria not asked you for bubble tea, but he's asked his grandfather?
Yeah, but kids are, but okay, whoa, hold on. So kids are master manipulators, and they're very good at figuring out what to ask which parent. So come on, if we're going to go down this route, you know that, for example, our kids never ask me for a sugary drink because I'm like, no sugar, basically. Like, you can have it. But on the flip side, if our kids want bath bombs or toys when we're going somewhere to a mall, they know to come to me, and I'm happy to give that to them. I'm happy to give them a gadget or a gizmo or anything like that, whereas you're not. But on the flip side, I will never ever go to a shop and buy them a sugary drink or even a sugary snack, whereas you will. So they're good at figuring that out.
They are, but they also benefit from the fact that if I've said no and you said no, there's 10 other people in their family that would say yes to them. Yeah. So again, that's making a child feel that they have so many people attuned to them, and that contributes to raising a secure individual. And I think that's really healthy, and it's worth pointing out. And I think in our faith as well, do you not feel like it's not black and white attachment theory? Like, if we were to look at the lives of the prophets, they didn't have a sole caregiver. Many of them didn't.
No. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you look at Rasulullah, like our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you look at the Prophet Muhammad, he during his lifetime, I believe, had 3 caregivers. So he had Amina, his mother, radiallahu anha, and then after that he had Abdul Muttalib when his mother passed away, who was his grandfather. And then I think around the age of 8, when Abdul Muttalib passed away, he had Abu Talib, who then took care of him until he became an adult. So that's 3 caregivers in the first 8 to 9 years of your life. So yeah.
And he experienced so much loss.
Yeah.
Loss of his father before he was born, his mother at an early age, and then his grandfather as well at a young age. But he is known to be one of the most secure individuals in history. Yeah. And he was able to then go and serve the world, the community, his wives, his children, because he was such a secure person. And I think that's what's really interesting. It's attachment theory is not just all based on that caregiver being there or not being there. It's a lot more nuanced than that.
Yeah. One thing which I've observed about myself is I don't know if the word is defect or my psychological traits in terms of my attachment style, they don't necessarily translate into my capacity as a parent. I find that, interestingly enough, even though I am an anxious attachment person when it comes to my spousal or my romantic relationship, or even in terms of my relationships with my colleagues and my friends, I am a very secure parent. So what is that about?
So it's really interesting because sometimes people think that attachment styles are universal across the board. If you're anxious in your marriage, you'll be anxious at work as well, but it usually doesn't translate because attachment styles are very context dependent and very relationship specific. So you can be anxious in your romantic relationship, but be secure in parenting, because what you need is a trigger. You need a circumstance that will trigger off your childhood wiring. And maybe that doesn't always translate into parenting, because in the parenting child-parent relationship, there's a lot of predictability. You're secure, you're in charge, you're the parent, you've set the rules. They will usually, abide. And if they're upset, you know what to do to repair. There's a lot of feedback that's quite predictable. You don't have that in romantic relationships, because you're two adults with your own, backgrounds and your own, insecurities or whatnot. So you're more likely to feel triggered or feel a loss of control or a loss of safety in those relationships. And same with work. Not everybody who's anxious in the romantic relationships will be anxious at work, or vice versa, because some people can see the boss and employee relationship as very professional. Like, if he gives me negative feedback, it's a professional thing. It's not a personal thing. I'm not going to take it personally. You're not my romantic partner. You're not my parent. You can kind of put it in a box and come home. So it's very much, you have to be in an environment that triggers and that old wiring again. And that doesn't translate and get across all relationships.
I think it also comes down to your capacity to form connections as well, right? Because I think some people are very good at being able to just treat work as work and not essentially emotionally and personally invest themselves in relationships with colleagues at work, or even try and connect with them. They have a very standoffish, or the ability to be very standoffish when it comes to relationships there. Everything is very sterile, so to speak. Work is very professional. Your personal life is very personal, where you actually forge your intimate relationships. And that's, I think, a point. You're less likely to basically be vulnerable and have intimacy with your colleagues to the level that you would have with a sibling or a parent or a spouse or a partner. So I think that also plays into it. Now, if you're the kind of person that's always seeking connection, you will try and find connection with colleagues as well. And you'll try and basically bond with them as well. And if they aren't reciprocating, that almost makes you feel anxious about it. And I'm talking about myself when I say this. So it's interesting. I want to talk about something actually which I found quite interesting. And I think actually it's either you sent me the post on LinkedIn or you liked this person's post. So the author is a therapist from the Ibn Sina Sanctuary, which I think is like a Muslim-centric therapy provider, or a psychology and a counseling provider. And author, one of the therapists, I think her name was Rebecca, she gave this wonderful analogy in this article of like when you enter into a romantic relationship, each partner is bringing to the relationship their own suitcase. So they're coming into the marriage or the relationship and they're moving in with each other, but it's like a metaphorical suitcase that you bring in. And each partner's suitcase will carry their lived experiences, their assumptions, their anxieties, potentially their traumas. And then as the marriage or the relationship evolves, those things start to get unpacked out of the suitcase. And then they potentially get seen when they're coming out of the suitcase, because obviously the suitcase is closed before. The partner starts to see those things coming out of the suitcase, and then they kind of determine or steer the course of the relationship. And I found it quite insightful, because I think that's very true. I think that in a marriage, when you get into marriage or into any kind of romantic relationship with a partner, you don't necessarily know what you're getting yourself into, right? And look, we have to address the fact that obviously we come from a way of thinking where you might meet someone either through an arranged marriage, or you might meet them at university, or you might see someone at work, but it's a very short period of actually seeing them, and then you're like, okay, we need to get our parents involved and get married. And that's the traditional kind of way that we were raised to kind of look at marriage. But we have to address the fact that in today's day and age, there are lots of couples that actually do date, and they go out for a very lengthy period of time before they decide to settle down. They may not even get married, right? But I would say that even in those situations as well, when someone has really got to know their partner over a period of weeks, months, maybe even years before they decide to marry them, you're still bringing the suitcase with you when you decide to settle down with them and actually start living with them. And then all those things kind of come to the surface. So I find it interesting. And I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that.
No, you're right. And I think this is what people call baggage.
Yeah.
We really do bring our baggage with us to our relationships, our past baggage. But at the same time, we also have life to contend with. How do you know how you or your partner is going to respond to in the time of, say, unemployment? Yeah. Or say, how would you navigate a miscarriage together? How would you navigate loss or relocation or a loss of a parent? You don't know until you're there and you're facing it. Because even I can't say until I've been in that situation, this is how I'm going to respond, or this is how my spouse is going to respond, or this is how we're going to deal with it together, unless we've done it. And I think that's what makes marriage, in a way, really hard, the unpredictability of it. Mm. Like, I feel like even today, the man in front of me at 42 is not the man I met aged 23 or 24, were you?
Yeah, duh, clearly. Look, I mean...
No, even physically, she was like, you are a different person. And that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that we do keep on growing and changing and evolving, because life does that to us. Mm. And we have to navigate that together. And sometimes people aren't able to withstand what life throws at them, or what childhood experiences bring up for them. Because it's hard. It really is hard.
Yeah. I mean, one thing which I've kind of learned from our life experiences, a marriage is a very interesting relationship, because it's not like your relationship with your parents, which is pretty much the same dynamic for the vast majority of your life. Okay, yes, there is a period of time where, let's say between the age of 0 to 18, it's constantly evolving, because you go from being a child to an adolescent who needs its own independence and is kind of learning his own kind of space and authority, to an adult. But then from that point forth, it becomes quite a fixed type of relationship. You know, it doesn't really evolve much. I don't find that with a marriage or with a romantic relationship. I find that I look at our own marriage and how we were 16, 17 years ago and how we are now. You know, how things have changed. I can have the kind of conversations with you now, the kind of deep, honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversations with you now that I just didn't have the courage to have 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. And so it's interesting to kind of see the evolvement of marriage. Like, initially, it was all about just having fun and not really, you know, facing our problems or whatever. And then we had kids, and then that's when life really got real. And obviously, you know, having to deal with things that life throws at you, like me losing my job during a recession, for example, me losing my mother, you know, and having to go through the grief and having you there as a support network. So it is really interesting. I think and I'm not bragging here, but I think what I'm really proud of when it comes to our relationship is the fact that we've always shown a desire to work together as a team. And, you know, we've had our fair share of difficult times, which marriage hasn't. But I think the thing that has always been consistent is the fact that we've always been on the same page, that we want to make things right. We want to make things work. We want to make sure that we understand each other better, and that we get, you know, have a closer and a better relationship. And so we've always worked towards it. And that's one of the reasons why, obviously, both of us, I think, separately went into therapy like 2.5 years ago. I mean, obviously, I went to therapy because I had a nervous breakdown and burnout, but you obviously went to therapy because of the impact that my nervous breakdown and my stresses was having on you, because obviously it could not have been easy for you being around me at that time. I know for a fact it wasn't easy for you to be around me at that time. I wasn't a very nice person to be around at that time. So you had to basically deal with that through therapy.
I think in my experience, what worked for us is that when we went to therapy and decided to do the work, what I found quite interesting was that the work was very individual. The work was very internal. Therapy didn't actually address much of what was actually going on in my life. It focused more on my responses, my behaviors, my triggers, my insecurities, and where they came from. And I think that was the best thing I got out of therapy, which was understanding myself better. And when I understood myself better, I started to focus more on my responses as opposed to what was going on all around me. And in turn, that brought me and you closer together.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't make our problems go away,
yeah,
it just gave us a stronger sense of self and our identity and awareness, which helped us to tackle the problems in a more mature way.
Yeah, so essentially you unpacked your suitcase. Basically, your imaginative suitcase, you unpacked it with a therapist. And then that enabled you to kind of see your issues and why you behave in a certain way when it comes to certain circumstances in our marriage. And then gave you the tools to then kind of discern and step out of yourself and see why you react to certain situations a certain way and what triggers you. And then almost kind of, I guess, then have the ability to not react to it, but to actually respond to it instead. That makes sense?
I think that summed it up really well.
Yeah.
Because my brain stopped ruminating over, why is he doing this? Why is she doing this? Why did he say that? Why did she say that? And it became about, okay, he did that. Okay, she said that. And how are you going to respond to it? What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And why did you do this in the past? What are you going to do differently this time? I love that I am more internal now and I am less reactionary. And I think that's the healthiest thing I've done for myself and for us.
Yeah, I think, and that's a good point, because I think one thing that has worked for me when I've done the therapy, and I know this has definitely benefited our relationship a lot as well, is that I am better at recognizing when I'm being triggered. And then I'm almost now I've developed this emotional intelligence, I'd say, where I'm able to turn around and say, hold on, you're inside thinking in this certain way about that person and what they're saying. Maybe you're being triggered because this is bringing up something about your own kind of insecurities, right? Maybe it's not that way at all. You know, I've learned to kind of challenge my way of thinking and reframe the way that I think. And then that kind of gives me then I'll ask myself, well, objectively, if I'm an objective person, how would I see the situation right now with the events that are unfolding right now? That ability to kind of step back and see things from that way now means that I don't immediately have a knee-jerk reaction where if something's happened, I get angry. Or if something happens, I get snappy or irritable, or basically respond back straight away. I'm much more measured in my ability to kind of just take in all the information. I might stay silent for a second or two longer, or might even walk away from the situation, and then come back and be able to kind of provide a more measured and mature response to it. And I think that's what I've really kind of developed over the last 2-3 years. And I think that's really beneficial in our marriage. So yeah, I think, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say what you've just said connects on to attachment styles and healing, because we talk about healing. What does that look like? How do we be more secure? How do we be more like this? And essentially, healing is partly the coherent story that we tell about ourselves our childhood, what happened, how we responded, not in a blameworthy kind of way, just in a very factual, matter of fact, this is my story, this is what happened, this is why I am the way I am. But those people who are able to tell that story coherently and honestly, they're the ones who are more likely to heal. Because again, there's an awareness of self, there's connections, there's an understanding, and that just brings healing to the kind of things we talk about.
Yeah, and I think what's really important, and what was really important for me, just talking about that path, was being able to walk that path without self-judgment and giving yourself the space. And what I mean by that is saying to yourself, yeah, okay, I made a mistake there. I'm human. I forgive myself for it. It's practicing self-compassion. And I think that really helped with the journey. I think the other thing which kind of also helped, just talking about how our relationship has evolved, is I think we have become much more effective at communicating. And as I was saying, I think a few moments earlier, I no longer have any anxieties about saying uncomfortable things to you, because, and it reminds me of, we were watching this podcast, you remember, I think it was a few months back, it was a Gabor Maté podcast where he's turned around and said that his wife said that the truth is sexy.
The truth is sexy.
The truth is sexy. I think that's true.
It is.
I think that when you are having open and transparent dialogue with your spouse or your partner, just going by my own experience of when we do it, it's uncomfortable. It really is. Having those old conversations, and sometimes you do kind of just want to like brush it away and say, oh no, we're done now. We'll just kind of run away from those conversations or change the topic. But and for a while after that, just reflecting on this and reflecting on the recent argument that we had, which is how we opened this discussion, there was that period of awkwardness and silence between us where we were just like, really? Is that true? Is that how you really feel about the whole situation? But then you go away and you process it. And I always feel that when we come back and then we have the reconciliation and then we kind of talk about the aftermath and we do a postmortem, which is, we've actually become very good at that. We actually postmortem now our arguments and fights and say, right, I felt this way because, or I said this because I felt that you did this and it made me feel that way. And we do that. It's actually helped me to understand you better. It really has. And so then I think, and it's given me the ability to then be more sympathetic and be more willing to accommodate and compromise more because I understand you better. And I think that's the one key takeaway that I would, if anyone asks me for marital advice or asks me how you deal with it, I'd say it's so important to have the uncomfortable and difficult conversations regularly with your partner.
I think if anybody asked me for marital advice, I think the advice I would give them is, don't personalize everything. Everything isn't about you. Everything isn't your fault. Everything isn't a reflection of your perceived inadequacy. Sometimes it's just about them and what they're struggling with or where they may be in their life.
Yeah. Don't
personalize everything. And I think that's what's been really helpful for me in this journey of understanding myself better, understanding you better, and working on our marriage together.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'd probably say also is that try and recognize that you cannot control everything and anything. You can only control your own self, your own agency, and your ability to react or respond to things. You can't control the other person. And I think sometimes that's where marriages go down a very slippery slope where people start to try and almost force each other or try and impose their views and thoughts on other people. So it's interesting. This has been a really interesting conversation, actually. Thank you for making the time to basically arrange this. I appreciate it.
So thank you for helping me navigate attachment styles, the drama triangle, all the things that I talked to you about, because I think it's really healthy.
Yeah.
I find I understand things better when I process them with you.
Yeah, no. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Reflections and Realizations. If the material that Alveena and I discussed resonated with you and you found it generally of interest, please do like and subscribe. Our aim is to try and get this message and what we're trying to promote out to the wider community. Your liking and subscribing really makes a massive difference in us being able to gain a wider reach and in our ability to actually continue the work that we're doing and bring other guests on this podcast. So thank you to everyone that is liking and subscribing so far. If those of you that are watching this can also just click the like button and subscribe so that you're up to date on the latest episodes as well, that would be truly appreciated. Thank you so much.